Hey everyone, welcome into another episode of No Holds Barred here at the Toronto Sun. Rob Wong with you. Please be joined today by seven-time Knockouts champion, one of the greatest female wrestlers in TNA and Impact Wrestling history. She's one of the most influential wrestlers in women's history. And of course, you've seen her on the Amazing Race Canada and one of my personal favorites, the Traitors Canada. And we'll definitely talk about that in a moment. But pleased to be joined by Toronto's own Gail Kim. Gail, how are you doing today?
Great. Thank you, Rob, for having me. I really
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Now, as far as I know, you're residing in Florida these days, but do you
Yeah.
get back home to Toronto often at all?
Of course. Toronto is truly, it's so funny because some of my Canadian friends will say I lost my Canadian card because I start blending holidays. But listen, I'm a Canadian at heart. I'll never lose my roots, and that's who I am, where I grew up. So,
Yeah, well, at this time of the year, I think a lot of people would prefer to be in Florida, so I don't think
yes,
you're
definitely.
feeling too bad about that. But is there anything you miss about Toronto or being home specifically, aside from, family,
Yeah.
of course?
Yeah, my family and friends, of course, but mostly, it's interesting growing up in Canada or Toronto specifically because it's so just an ethnic melting pot. When I moved to the United States, it was kind of a culture shock for me. I've adjusted nicely, of course, but I miss that aspect because, of course, the food, you have Koreatown, two Koreatowns now, from what I hear, Chinatown, Greek town. I miss all the food.
Yeah, that's a good call. Some of the best Asian food in the world, that is for sure. So, plenty to talk with you about today. And I would say right now, it's not even just now, but for a while now, it's been a big movement as far as, women's wrestling and just the growth that we've seen in the industry, whether it's, TNA, whether it's AEW, and of course, WWE. You being a pioneer in all of this and, getting to see all of this growth, what has it meant to you? Because you were one of the first people to really take it to another level and to see the evolution of where it is now. What has it been like for you to watch it all evolve and grow?
I always tell everyone I've been very fortunate to have a very long career and also be part of so many different generations of women. And so I got to experience when I first entered wrestling, the golden era of women, Trish Stratus, Lita, Jazz, Molly Holly, like an incredible group of women that when you look back, I'm like, wow. Just even though I was so green and probably not ready for the big time at that time, I look back and I am so appreciative of being part of that era. And then, of course, the knockouts, fighting for the women's division. I never thought that I'd be able to see during the course of my career where women would start main eventing WrestleManias. I mean, for it to come to fruition over the course of my career, I never thought that was going to happen. And it's just so satisfying and it's very fulfilling in my heart, to see these ladies achieve what they do. And also the amount of women now. So each generation kind of inspires the next generation. So it's even people ask me in interviews all the time, who would you want to wrestle now? And there's just so many talented women to choose from now. And that's something that I never thought I would see for
No,
sure.
it's a great point. There's just a wide selection of fan favorites, and everyone has their own. Are there, maybe a few that you can sort of pick as far as people you just really enjoy watching? Maybe people that maybe
Yeah.
remind you of yourself, or if you see that they're coming up, that you got to sit down and tune in to see how their match is going to go.
Definitely. I'll say, some of the girls, such as a Natalia Neidhart or a Charlotte Flair, who had to follow in the footsteps of legendary dads. I always say this about even the guys like a Dominic Mysterio and Randy Orton. For them to follow in the steps of pure legends, that's a lot of pressure for them. And for them to even equal or surpass what their parents have done, it's incredible because you have a lot to live up to. Um, I love, actually, I got a little short time period this summer working with the NXT girls and just to see the athleticism. And I know women get into the business now in a very different way because WWE started recruiting college athletes, which is great. In some ways, you get these people that you can train pretty much at zero and teach them exactly how you want them to wrestle. So in WWE, that's great because they pretty much go straight to learning TV wrestling. So that's incredible. Those girls, they blew me away in 4 weeks. I couldn't believe the level of athleticism, the respect and the hardcore training and the dedication that they have. It was incredible to see.
So, you mentioned the sports background for a lot of these people coming into NXT or the Performance Center. It's nothing new, of course. You look at a lot of professional wrestlers, they were athletes as kids or college, whether it's football,
Mhm.
basketball, wrestling, of course, what have you. But I'm curious for someone like yourself, where you had that crossover where you're a mix of the old school and a mix of the new school. When you're seeing these people that maybe weren't fans of wrestling growing up, or they picked it up really late, how do you view that? Because I know there's a lot of people out there that wish it could just be people that were diehard wrestlers from like the age of
Yeah.
12, and they've wanted to get to this point. And not that those people are kind of looked poorly upon, but there's a section of sort of the old school that are like shying away from that and wish it would just be people that really truly love the business growing up.
Yeah, and I think those people who are, let's just say, handed opportunities, for lack of a better term, you can't fault them for it because, hey, most of us probably would have taken that chance too. Hey, we have an opportunity to sign with WWE and be on TV. I think what's lost sometimes, not all the time, and I didn't experience that at NXT this summer. When people are handed things, that's where kind of the respect level sometimes gets lowered. And so people don't really understand the grind and the sacrifice that other people have to take to get there. So that's kind of lost in translation at times, but it depends on how you're trained or who you're trained by and whether you're taught that respect. And listen, wrestling old school is all about respect. I mean, and even I got it from my family, a Korean household. My dad was, it's just all about respect and respecting the top of the food chain. And so that's how wrestling is. And so I haven't experienced it in the last couple of years being around any organizations, but I'll say there was a time period where everyone's kind of like, gosh, like respect has totally gone out the window and people don't even say hi anymore or show any type of respect. But I think it's slowly changing again, which is nice to see.
Yeah, and I know it's been interesting to hear from the women's side of things, because you mentioned Natty Neidhart before, and she's a friend of mine. Just
Yeah.
incredible person, of course. But
Yeah.
to hear her talk about what the locker room is like in WWE these days, and just how everybody's rooting for each other and everybody's
Yeah.
trying to pull on the same rope, that wouldn't have happened a few years ago, right? Everybody, it's a business where people are trying to fight to the top of the food chain, as you sort of referenced, and trying to get theirs. But when you have that situation where the locker room and everybody's getting along and pulling for each other and wanting everyone to do well. I mean, that can only help but elevate the product, obviously, on a week to week basis.
Definitely. I mean, I'm just thinking about my mindset back when I was wrestling, and my mindset was always because I had experienced early on in my career where people, yeah, they didn't care about making me look good in the ring and, a little bit more selfish, and you had to deal with kind of politics of that. And I was never a politicker. So and in my positions, I just kind of did what I did at what I was told at that time. But so I told myself, I never want to be like that. I never want anyone to feel like the way I felt when I was put in those positions. So you always try to make things make sense, for what they want, wrestling wise. But at the same time, I always thought, me trying to outshine my opponent on purpose, like who's going to benefit from that? Like that just makes me look like that number one. And who suffers? The fans suffer, I think, overall for the quality of the match. So for me, I always thought play to my opponent's strengths. What's going to make this match the best match or the most entertaining match that the fans would love to see? And in the end, honestly, then everyone wins. I win for looking good. They win for looking good. The fans enjoy the whole match. That was always my way of thinking.
Yeah, and I think the fans are pretty smart for the most part.
Yes,
They can
yes,
tell
yes.
maybe when you're not giving your full effort, or something is going on there that's a little amiss. So that's a great point you make there. So you talked about working with these NXT athletes over the summer. What is your advice to people that are just getting started? Because you have so much experience. I'm sure you're asked about it all the time from people that are just getting started in this business. What is sort of the number one thing that you always make sure to tell everyone?
I would say, gosh, it's really hard. Just one thing. I mean, when it came to matches, I would always tell people to play to their opponent's strengths because some wrestlers, like I said, they just have like one style. And so they would they would wrestle their type of match, and that's not necessarily how for example, if I was wrestling a Maurice, for example, for a match, she was always more entertainment based. So I always took those chances or those opportunities to play off of her character, and that was where I knew wrestling in the ring, the actual sport of wrestling was my gift or my advantage. So when I had the opportunity to work on things I wasn't as strong as, such as character work in the ring, if I was wrestling a Maurice or an ODB or someone like that, I would take those opportunities to strengthen those or polish those tools. Um, I would definitely say I can tell when I'm producing or overseeing a roster of talent, I can tell who's sacrificing. I can tell who's putting in the work. And I'll tell you, I can count on one hand in the entire business that I know. The people who really grind, who really sacrifice. And I know that because I did it, those nights that, yeah, everybody's at the bar and having a drink, but you have a pay-per-view match that's really important the next day. I never gave in to a peer pressure at those points. I'm like, I don't have FOMO. I'm going to bed. I'm going to get my 7 hours of sleep and wake up in the morning and be disciplined, go to the gym and watch my matches to study the night before. And I'm not saying everyone has to have the same way of doing it, but you just know who's sacrificing.
Yeah, look, I guess it's a little bit different these days with the schedules
Yeah.
that these
Yeah.
athletes have. It's not as big of a grind as people had it in the past, so that definitely helps. But as you said, at the end of the day, caring about the craft and putting all of your effort into it is really what gets people to the top for sure. So you stated before that you are retired at this point. Do you
Yeah.
miss it at all? Is there a part of you that wishes you were still doing it? I know you've spoken before about sort of the physical aspect and how that was
Yeah.
challenging, but is there, days or weeks you wake up and you're like, gosh, I wish I was still out
I wish that my body felt like what I felt like in my 20s or even my early 30s, because I remember feeling invincible, as a lot of them do. You see them doing crazy stuff. And then as the years go on, your body, that's how I knew I was going to retire, because right at the very end, in the last couple of years, I would watch, say, the monitor of someone else wrestling, and I go, oh, and I'd react like I felt the pain. And so when I was like, why am I reacting like that? I never had that reaction before. So once I started to feel the pain of other wrestlers, watching them do something that looked painful, it was kind of my first red flag. Why am I reacting that way? Before, I never even thought about the pain or anything like that. And so I'll say, of course, I miss the sport of wrestling. I miss having that adrenaline rush. And I don't mind doing some physicality spots here and there if I'm ever booked for anything. A full match is something entirely different. Um, I guess I would say never, but it would have to be something really, really special. And for me to get conditioned for a full match, I don't think people realize how hard it is to train for the cardio of a professional wrestling match. So I retired in 2017, came out of retirement for Tessa Blanchard in 2019. So it was about 15 months, I think, since I had had a match. And I told them I'm coming out of retirement for her, but I'm only going to have one match. I'm not having multiple matches to lead up to it, just one. So I busted my butt. I mean, when I tell you, I was on the road and any cardio I could get. I was going up 60 flights of hotel stairs, speeding up, walking down, doing it multiple times. And even that couldn't even prepare me really for
there.
what's really going on in that ring. I made it through, but after that, I remember going, oh, I never want to go through that again. And I remember thinking too, my nerves before the match, I had never, it was 100 times worse than what I remembered because I hadn't wrestled for so long. And also, the last thing, which is the most important thing, um, I care about my legacy. I care about my body of work that I left behind and what fans remember of me. So if I'm coming out of retirement, this is going to be the last thing they remember. So I don't want to have, I don't want them to think I've slowed down. I don't want them to think, I'm rusty or whatever it is. I'm very hard on myself when it comes to that.
Yeah, I love that you bring that up because, wrestling is built so much on nostalgia, a lot of it,
Yeah.
and people, think back to when they used to watch or certain wrestlers that they watch, and it's kind of relating into what John Cena's going through right now, of course, and hard to
Yes.
believe there's like 2 weeks left. It's going to be over. in
I
just a couple of
know.
weeks. But I'm sure
Incredible.
he's felt similar things where he wants to make sure he's given his best, and he wants people to enjoy this final
Right.
run that he's going on. And I've really enjoyed it, of course. And as
Yeah.
we're getting to the end here, it's a little bit sad in some ways, but it's still cool that fans are getting this final run for John Cena. So I mentioned before, Traitors Canada. You were on
Yeah.
season two. My wife and I love the Traitors, and
Yeah.
I was like so excited to see that you were on it. So I was like, oh,
Yeah.
this is going to be cool just to see how Gail navigates it. For me, I could tell even just watching the show. Obviously, Michael was a traitor. I think he did a very poor job, and you kind of clocked him right away. You had a sense that there was
I
something
gotta tell
going
you a
on there.
backstory on that one, though. I gotta tell you a backstory
Yeah,
on.
go for it. Okay.
So, well, actually, with Traders too, because I had such a bad outcome on Amazing Race, right? So we got booted on the first episode. So I literally said after that, I'm never doing reality shows ever again, right? So I got asked to do Amazing Race Canada. And then so I got asked again to do Traders from a different casting agent. And I went, "Ugh, I'm not doing a reality show." And I knew about Traders from the UK. I had just so happened to catch it at one point. And I found it interesting, but I was like, no, I had a bad experience. And then so just something was going on in my life personally at that time. And I really wanted to test my gut instincts because it was just something kind of traumatizing for me. So I said, oh, well, maybe I'll just talk to her for a second. And I told her, I said, I'm not taking work off. Like I was really making it hard to cast me. So I said, I'm not taking work off. And Amazing Race was a commitment of 4 weeks with no phone, no nothing, and everything. So she said, oh, well, it's only 12 days. And I went, oh, 12 days. And then she said, and it's from this date to this date. And it just so happened to land right in between TNA TV tapings. And the end part, so they're filming the show in Montreal, and Slammiversary, which was going to be at the end part of everything, was in Montreal. So I said, oh gosh, this is aligning way too weirdly, right? So I said, okay, okay. So they agreed to everything and it was great. So when I was there and Michael John was there, you start with 22 contestants, but you're not really allowed to talk to anyone. They kind of keep you very silent. And when you get to talk, they keep it pretty strict about what you can talk about. And you can't talk to 22 contestants right off the bat. So you take time to learn, get to know people. So probably by day three, I got to know Michael John. And it just so happened, he said, oh, yeah, I wrestled with you on the Indies. And I went, wait,
Wow.
what? Yeah. So I said, this is crazy. I said, oh, where? And he would tell me. And he said, La Felina. He brought up my independent name. I said, this is insane. He goes, yeah, I was told not to talk to girls when, back then. And I said, oh, well, that's weird. And it was kind of old school wrestling. So the promoter, who was Scott Demore, he kept us very protected. So he said, keep the guys away kind of thing. So I got to know him and I thought, oh, good, wrestlers have each other's backs. We kind of always connect in some way, even if we don't know each other. And then I watched the show back and he was trying to kill me from day one or day two. And I couldn't believe it. And I texted the other girls, the traders, and I said, how many times did he try to kill me? And they said, oh, yeah, like pretty much every night. It's just gobsmacked, right? I couldn't
Wow.
believe it. I couldn't believe it.
That's an amazing story. I had no
Yeah.
idea that whole because I
Yeah.
don't think they showed that or referenced that at all. That you
No,
guys
they
knew each
didn't.
other.
Yeah.
They tried to make sure that you were separated. But
Yeah.
so obviously you didn't make it to the end. Kira and
No.
Netta, they ended up murdering you. Did you have any sense that they were traitors during the show?
No. No. Listen, those two girls were the closest two girls in the house to me. So that's why I made it so far, number one. And I know that I shouldn't probably say this for CTV's reasons, but I went on the show for the experience. I didn't really want to win it because I felt like other people were there and really wanted to win it. And I'm actually really glad that Netta came out on top because she put in so much effort and work. I don't know if you saw some Instagram stuff after that. She had like 75 pages of research done. She had everything planned out from her outfits to her tone of voice to everything. I just jumped in and didn't prepare at all. So the person who deserved to win won the season. So I was very happy
Yeah.
to. Congratulations.
Absolutely. She played an incredible game.
Yeah.
Before we let you go and before we finish talking about Traitors, I got to know
Yeah.
that day you were stuck in the cage, it's raining
Oh,
outside. How brutal was that experience? Because watching it, I was like, that doesn't look fun at all.
no, I was in there for hours. Okay. And the good part was, okay, they didn't know it was going to rain, and I would have put on a hoodie if I had known it was going to rain. It started raining after I got in the cage. And so they kind of stuck an umbrella up there between when they had the cameras off or when the other contestants weren't around. So they stick an umbrella up there and I'd have to just hold it in the birdcage, and then they're like, "Okay, they're coming," and I have to close it and shove it out. My eyelashes were falling off in the rain, everything. It was just like it was a very memorable experience, I'll say that. And I never thought I was going to get out of the cage or make it another 2 episodes after that. So it was a blessing.
Yeah, it was amazing to watch. It's probably my favorite reality show as far as game shows go out there. So it was awesome to see you there. Will we see you on another reality show, or are you
Uh,
done?
if it fits my personality, I know Amazing Race does not, even though you would think it does. It was hard. I mean, and I didn't even, I did one episode and I hardly even participated, but just talking to everyone else at the very end, I never want to do Amazing Race. I'd much rather do something that's more paced like Traders. I get to drink wine, get to know people, and then just have fun together. It was one of the best experiences of my life, I'll say.
Yeah, and each
Yeah.
day you make it through, you get to have an incredible breakfast at the manor.
Yes.
So that's a nice little perk as
Yeah.
well. Gail, really
Yeah.
appreciate the time today. Thanks so much for
Thank
doing this,
you.
and hopefully we'll talk again soon.
Yes, definitely. Thank you.